Last time, we learned how Rome grew from a story into a powerful city. We saw kings and laws in the forum below us. But we didn't talk about the price people had to pay for that power.
That price forced Rome to change. Not slowly, not nicely, but with violence.
Welcome back to Rome Unveiled. I am Sarah, and once again I am standing on the Capitoline hill. And yes, Giovanni, you are still stuck with me.
It is a fate I am learning to accept, Sarah. Last time we were here, I believe I left you with a picture. I compared a perfect vase to a pile of broken pieces.
You did. You told me that the neat, tidy stories of Rome's first 5 kings were the beautiful, complete vase of legend, and that archaeology only gives us the messy, broken pieces.
To understand the Roman Republic, the government that would go on to conquer the world, you first have to understand what it was running from. And what it was running from was a tyrant, a king who broke all the rules. The story of the Republic's birth does not begin with a hopeful speech. It begins in darkness, with a city in a very dangerous situation.
That sounds very serious.
For a moment, yes. We are jumping to the end of the line, to the 7th and final king of Rome, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus. His name, Superbus, it means the proud, or the arrogant. And he earned it.
I feel like if your official nickname is the arrogant, you are probably not very popular.
You are not. Under him, Rome was not a happy place. Imagine a city full of quiet anger. The air is thick and heavy. It is not just the usual smells of wood smoke and the river. It is also the smell of fear. Every public project, every new temple, is built with forced labor. The senators, the leading men of the city, are ignored. Or worse, they are killed for false reasons. The king takes their property. The king rules not with the agreement of the people, but by making them afraid.
It sounds less like a kingdom and more like a criminal organization.
An excellent comparison. The agreement between the king and the people was broken. For many years, the king had been the chief priest, the chief judge, and the chief general. But he was also, in a way, the chief father of the Roman family. He was supposed to have a council, the Senate, made of the elders of the most important families. He was supposed to ask for their advice. Superbus did not. He ruled alone.
So before we dive into how it all fell apart, can you give me a quick reminder? What exactly was a Roman king supposed to be? What powers did he have before this guy Superbus went bad?
Of course. It is a very important question. The Roman king, the Rex, held a power they called imperium. It was complete. It was the power of life and death over the citizens. He led the army in war, and he gave justice in peace. He was also the city's religious leader. He was the main person who spoke to the gods for the people. He chose priests and led the most important state ceremonies.
So has the general, the judge, and the high priest, all in one person. That's a lot of power for one person.
A huge amount. But it was not, in theory, passed from father to son. The king was chosen. After a king died, there was a period called the interregnum, meaning a time between kings. During this time, power went back to the Senate. They would choose a candidate. His position had to be approved by the People's Assembly, the Curiate Assembly. And, most importantly, it had to be confirmed by the gods. They did this by reading the auspices, which means watching the flight of birds for a sign.
So there was a system of limits, even if it was a simple one. The Senate, the people, the gods, they all had a say.
Exactly. It was a balance of human politics and a sign from the gods. The king wore a purple toga. He sat on a special chair called the curule chair. He was followed everywhere by 12 attendants called lictors. Each lictor carried the fasces. This was a bundle of rods with an axe in the middle. It was a symbol of his power to command and to punish.
The axe is a pretty clear message. Do not cross me.
Very clear message. And for most of the time of the kings, this system, this monarchy worked. It took Rome from a group of villages and turned it into a proper city, a strong power in the area. The kings built the first forum, the great sewer, and the temples. They organized the army. They gave Rome its shape.
But later Romans, the ones living in the Republic, they did not remember it that way, did they? For them, the word king was almost a bad word.
It was the worst political insult. To say a rival wanted to be king was the most serious charge you could make. For them, the whole time of the monarchy was one story. A necessary but dangerous time that always ended in cruel rule. They saw it as a lesson. Power, held by one man for life, will always become bad. And their proof, their main example, was Tarquinius Superbus.
So Superbus becomes the perfect example of why monarchy is a terrible idea. How did he get to be so Superbus? What did he actually do that was so different from the kings before him?
Well, the stories say his path to the throne began with murder. He planned with the daughter of the ruling king, Servius Tullius, to kill her father. The story is very shocking. After his men killed the old king in the street, the daughter, Tullia, is said to have driven her chariot over her father's body. His blood went all over her clothes and the carriage.
Okay, that is very evil. That is a new level of family problems.
It sets the tone, does it not? He takes the throne by violence, not by election. He refuses to let the former king be buried. He immediately gets a bodyguard. This is a classic sign of a tyrant, meaning a cruel ruler, who fears his own people.
He is breaking all the rules from day one. No Senate approval, no popular vote, no sign from the gods.
None of it. He then begins to remove his rivals in the Senate. He accuses them of treason and takes their money. He uses this new wealth and the forced work of the common people, the plebeians, to start huge building projects. The grand temple on this very hill, the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, was his great project.
So he is a tyrant, but he is building things. I feel like that is a common theme with dictators. Sure, I am oppressing you, but look at this shiny new temple.
It is a way to show power and to keep a restless population busy. But it creates anger. The aristocrats, the patricians, hate him because he has removed them from power. The commoners hate him because he is working them to death. He also fights constant wars against Rome's neighbors. He does not do this to defend the state, but to make himself richer and to distract from the problems at home.
It is amazing how much of this sounds like it could be from a modern news story. The methods of a tyrant really do not change much, do they?
Fear, greed, and spectacle. It is a timeless recipe. So you have this situation. Rome is like a bomb ready to explode. The leading families are whispering in dark corners. They are waiting for a chance to get their influence back. The people are tired and angry. All it will take is one small event to start the explosion.
And that small event comes from his family, does it not? From his own son.
Yes. While the Roman army is away, attacking the city of Ardea, the king's son, Sextus Tarquinius, commits a crime so deep, so offensive to Roman values that it becomes the point of no return. But to understand why this one act could destroy a kingdom, you have to understand the people who will use it as their weapon.
It is all so complex. Trying to picture the city at this time, with the new construction, the political tension, the many people involved, it is a lot to think about.
It is. The shape of the city is a character in this story.
If you want to imagine all of this, the Forum, the Palatine Hill, and why they were important, our app can help. Use the Rome Audio Tour Guide offline app. You can stand in the Roman Forum and hear stories about how power really worked in the past.
Having that map of the city is very important for understanding the power. Where the temple stood, where the Senate met, where the people lived, it all mattered.
Right. So we have a tyrant on the throne, a restless city, and an army off at war. And now, this terrible crime is about to happen. But before we get to the story itself, there's something we need to talk about. The date. Everyone learns it in school. The Roman Republic was founded in 509 BCE. It sounds so exact, so certain.
Ah, yes. 509. The perfect number. It is simple and almost certainly wrong.
Wrong? How can it be wrong? It is one of the most famous dates in history.
It is famous because a Roman scholar named Marcus Terentius Varro, writing in the 1st century before Christ, made it famous. He was a librarian, an expert on old things. He loved order. He sat down and tried to create a final timeline for Roman history.
So he is the person who organized Rome's history files.
A perfect way to put it. But he had a problem. For the early time, the files were empty. There were no written records from the time of the kings. No diaries, no government papers. Not many people could read and write. And what was written was usually on materials that did not last.
So what did he use? How do you write a history with no sources?
You work backwards. He took the list of leaders from the later republic, which was better documented. He knew they served for 1 year each. So he just counted backwards, year by year. He gave each one a neat 1-year term, all the way back to the beginning. Then he tried to connect his Roman timeline with the more established timeline of the Greeks. He knew about certain events in Greek history, so he tried to make the Roman story fit.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that 509 before Christ is not based on an old object or an ancient message, but on a later scholar's math problem?
Basically, yes. It is a very smart piece of work, but it is a reconstruction. It puts a clean, orderly pattern on a past that was probably much messier. It is like finding a box of old family photos with no names. Then you decide each person must have lived exactly 80 years, and you arrange them in a neat line based on that idea.
So what does the archaeology, the broken pieces, tell us? Does it show a big fire, a destroyed palace, some sign of a violent revolution in 509?
Not at all. That is the big problem. The archaeology shows that life continued. The pottery styles do not suddenly change. The building methods stay the same. There is no destruction layer, meaning a sign of a big fire or fight, in the Forum or on the Palatine Hill that matches this date. The change from the monarchy to the early republic, as seen in the ground, looks less like a sudden explosion and more like a slow, gradual change over many years.
So the Vase, the story, tells us about a dramatic one-night revolution. But the broken pieces, the physical evidence, suggests a slow political change that might have taken 50 years.
Exactly. The year 509 is a symbol. It is a convenient place to hang a beautiful story. The reality was probably a long power struggle among the leading aristocratic families. They slowly took the king's powers away, piece by piece, until the office itself disappeared or was replaced. The revolution may not have been a single event, but a process.
That makes so much more sense, but it is way less dramatic. Nobody makes a blockbuster movie called The Long Period of Slow Political Change.
No, they do not. You need a story. You need heroes and villains. You need a crime and you need revenge. And the Romans, who were master storytellers, created one of the best.
So if Varro is just doing math centuries later, where did the story itself come from? Who wrote it all down?
The main versions of the story that survive come from two historians, Titus Livius, who we call Livy, and a Greek historian named Dionysius of Halicarnassus. Both were writing around the time of the first emperor, Augustus, nearly 500 years after the events they were describing.
500 years. That is like someone today writing a detailed eyewitness-style story about Christopher Columbus, based on family stories.
It is a very good comparison. They were not writing history as we would understand it. They were not investigative reporters. They were moralists, meaning they wanted to teach lessons. They were writing to provide examples of good and bad behavior for their own generation. Their goal was to create a grand, patriotic story.
So where did they get their information from? Were they just making it all up?
Not completely. They were using earlier writers whose works are now lost to us. These earlier writers were called the Annalists. They tried to write year-by-year histories of Rome. But even they were writing centuries after the fact.
So it is a history based on a history based on a history. A copy of a copy.
Yes. And the sources for those early annalists were themselves a problem. They had a few small records, lists of priests, some agreements written on bronze, but mostly they relied on two things: oral tradition and what we call family histories.
Family histories? You mean like the stories a grandfather tells his grandson?
Exactly. The great Roman aristocratic families, the gentes, kept stories about their ancestors. At a Roman funeral for a great noble, actors would wear wax masks of the family's famous ancestors and walk through the forum. At the same time, someone gave a speech telling all their heroic stories.
That sounds very dramatic. And also like a way to make stories bigger.
Of course. Every family wanted their ancestor to be the hero, the one who started the republic, the bravest soldier. These stories were a kind of political advertising. Over many years, they were made better and bigger. The Annalists then took these different, often opposing family stories and made them into one national story.
So the official history of the Republic's birth is like a best of collection of rich families' campaign stories.
That is a little dark, but it is not wrong. So when we read Livy's story of the Revolution, we are not reading a true report. We are reading a great work of historical fiction, a powerful myth. It was made to explain to the Romans who they were, and why their strong dislike of kings was so important to their identity.
Okay, so with that big warning that what we will hear is more of a national story than a true fact, let's hear the story. Let's see the perfect vase. How did the Roman monarchy end?
It begins, as I said, at the siege of Ardea. The king's son, Sextus Tarquinius, and some other young noblemen are drinking in their tent. They start arguing about whose wife is the best. To decide the winner, They decide to ride back to Rome and secretly watch their wives.
This sounds like a very bad idea from the start. A group of drunk soldiers riding off to check on their wives.
It is. They find their own wives in Rome, eating and having fun. But then they ride to the town of Colatia. There they find Lucretia, the wife of one of the men, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. She is not having fun. She is at home, late at night, making wool with her servants. She is the perfect example of Roman female virtue, pudicitia, which means chastity, modesty, and loyalty to her family.
And she wins the bet for her husband. But I think this does not end well for her.
It does not. Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son, feels a strong desire for her. A few nights later, he returns to Colatia alone. Lucretia's family welcomes him into the house as a guest. He is related to her husband. In the middle of the night, he goes to her room. He takes out his sword and says he will kill her if she shouts.
This is terrible.
She is not afraid of the threat of death. So he makes a different threat, one that is, to a Roman noblewoman, worse than death. He tells her that he will kill her, then kill a male slave, and put the slave's body next to hers. He will then say he found her having a secret relationship with a servant.
So he is threatening not just her life, but her honor, her good name forever. People would remember her as an unfaithful wife, bringing shame to her husband and her father forever.
Exactly. Her good character, the very thing that made people respect her, would be gone. Faced with this impossible shame, she gives in. He rapes her and leaves.
I cannot even imagine.
The next day, Lucretia sends a message for her father, who is an important man in Rome, and her husband, Collatinus. They arrive with two trusted friends. One of them is a man named Lucius Junius Brutus. He is the king's nephew, but for years he has pretended to be a fool, an idiot. The name Brutus means the dullard, to avoid the king's dangerous fear of others.
So he has been waiting for a long time, acting like a fool, so the bad ruler would not see him as a danger.
Yes. Lucretia, crying, tells the four men what happened. She makes them promise that they will get revenge for her. She says it is for you to decide what he deserves. As for me, I am not guilty of the crime, but I will not avoid the punishment. No bad woman shall live in the future, using Lucretia as an excuse.
Oh no.
And then, before they can stop her, she takes out a knife she had hidden in her clothes and kills herself.
So in her mind, even though she was completely innocent, the only way to prove her good character was to die.
In the story, yes, her body becomes the final symbol of the state, hurt and made dirty by the bad ruler's family. And it is at this moment that Brutus the dullard shows his true self. He pulls the bloody knife from Lucretia's chest and holds it up. He promises by her blood that he will fight the king, his evil wife, and all their children with fire and sword. He promises he will never again let any man be king in Rome.
That's the start. That's the moment the revolution begins.
That is the moment. The four men carry Lucretia's body to the local market square, and then to Rome itself. They show her body in the Roman Forum, for all to see. Brutus gives a very angry speech. He tells the people not just about this crime, but all the crimes of the king, the murder of the king before him, the forced work, the pride. The people of Rome, very angry, rise up. They vote to remove the king and to send him and his family away forever.
And just like that, the rule by kings is over.
Just like that. Brutus and Collatinus, Lucretia's husband, are chosen as the first two leaders of the new free state. They are not called kings. They are called consuls. And the Roman Republic is born.
Wow. As a story, it's very powerful. It has everything. A good hero, a terrible villain, a sad sacrifice, and a big revolution. It's no surprise people remember it.
It is a perfect story. It explains the unexplainable. Why do we hate kings? Because of what Sextus Tarquinius did. Why is private good character important for public freedom? Because of Lucretia. Why must we give up things for the state? Because of Brutus. It is the perfect example.
So the king is gone. The people have risen up. Brutus and Collatinus are in charge. What happens next? You can't just change a kingdom into a republic so easily. How do you build a new government from nothing, especially when you are very afraid of giving too much power to one person?
That is the big problem they faced, and their answer was very clever, born completely from their fear of the past. The main idea of the new government was to take the power of the king, the imperium, and break it into pieces.
How do you do that?
First, you never give it to just one man. You always give it to at least two. That is why they created two consuls, not one. Each consul had the full power of the old king, but so did his partner. And, very importantly, each consul had the power of veto over the other. This means he could say no to the other's decision.
So one could stop the other's decision. It's a built-in emergency brake.
Exactly. It forces them to work together and find agreement. It makes it impossible for one man to become a dictator. Second, you limit their time in office. The king ruled for life. The consuls would rule for only 1 year. After that, they became normal people again, and they had to answer for their actions while in power.
So you have partnership, always having a partner, and you have time limits. That's a huge change.
It is the heart of the Republic. Power is shared, and power is temporary. They kept the symbols of power, the lictors with the fasces, which were bundles of sticks with an axe. But the story says they made a symbolic change. Inside the holy city border, the pomerium, they removed the axe from the bundle.
What did that mean?
It meant that inside the city walls, a consul did not have the king's complete power of life and death. A citizen could not be killed without a trial and the right to ask the people for help. The axe, the symbol of killing without a good reason, only returned to the fasces when the army was outside the city, at war.
That's a really powerful picture. It's like they were building safety rules into the very center of their new government.
They were. And what about the other groups? The Senate, which Tarquinius Superbus had ignored, was brought back to a place of great importance. It didn't make laws, not at first, but it was the great advice council. It was made up of former leaders, the most experienced men in the state. Their group wisdom and influence, their auctoritas, guided the decisions of the consuls. To ignore the Senate was to end your political life.
So the rich and powerful families got their power back. This revolution was really led by them, for them, wasn't it?
In the beginning, yes, absolutely. This was not a popular democratic uprising. It was a takeover by the nobles, a return of power to the great families. The common people, the plebeians helped, but the new system was made to be run by the rich and powerful elite.
That is a lot of information. New leaders, the Senate, and new laws. If you are visiting Rome, the Rome Audio Tour Guide offline app makes everything easy to understand. It has walking tours with GPS maps to show you exactly where history happened. Best of all, you can download everything, the maps and audio work, without using the internet.
And seeing the real place where the Senate House stood, or where the People's Assembly met, makes this complex political story much easier to understand.
It really does. So they have dealt with the leader's power. What about the king's religious job? You cannot just fire the high priest, can you? The gods might get angry.
A very Roman worry. And they had a clever and very strange solution. They created a new priestly job called the Rex Sacrorum, the king of the sacred rites.
The king of the sacred rites? They removed the king, but then created a new job with the word king in the title? That sounds strange.
It does, but look at the details. This new king was allowed to perform these specific public religious ceremonies that only a king could perform. He took over the king's religious calendar and duties, but, and this is the clever part, he was not allowed to hold any political or military job. He had no political power.
So they took the king's old job, split it into two parts, and gave the political power to the consuls and the religious duties to this new priest, who was not allowed to have any real power.
Exactly. They kept the necessary religious job while completely separating it from political power. It shows you just how deeply they feared one person having all the power. They cut apart the old role of the king very carefully, making sure that no single man could ever put it back together.
So we have this new republic. It is a government run by a small group of powerful families. It is designed from the beginning to prevent one-person rule. But why did this particular story, the Lucretia story, become so important? You said the real change was probably a slow, messy process. Why did the Romans choose to remember it as this single dramatic event?
Because nations need founding stories. A slow 50-year political discussion between powerful families does not excite the heart. It does not give a moral guide. The story of 509 before Christ does.
What kind of guide does it provide? What is it telling Romans about themselves?
It tells them that their republic was born from a defense of goodness against a terrible crime. Lucretia's body becomes a symbol for the state itself. Her attack by the king's son is like the attack on the Roman people by a bad ruler. Her suicide is a call to fight. It shows the entire revolution not as a selfish power grab by rich men, but as a good moral fight.
So it is the final reason. Our state exists because we stood up for what was right against a great evil.
Exactly. And it puts core Roman values directly into the state's beginning. The ideal of female purity, pudicitia, becomes linked to the health of the republic. The ideal of the citizen who puts public duty above personal safety, like Brutus, becomes the model for every Roman leader.
And Brutus is a fascinating person in this. He is related to the king, but he overthrows him. Later, the story says he even has to kill his own two sons when they plan to bring the Tarquins back.
Yes, and that story, whether true or not, became the ultimate example, the ultimate moral lesson. Brutus sacrifices his own children for the good of the republic. The message is clear. Loyalty to the state, to libertas. Liberty is the highest possible good, greater even than love for your own family.
It is a very hard moral rule.
It is a very hard moral rule. But it is the morality of a state that felt it was always close to destruction. surrounded by enemies. This story provided a set of clear, strong, and powerful ideals to live by, and they held on to it for hundreds of years. When Julius Caesar was seen as becoming a king 500 years later, who was it that led the plan to kill him? A man named Marcus Junius Brutus, who said he was from the family of the original Brutus and saw himself as repeating his ancestors' heroic act.
So the story was not just a story they told about the past. It was an active force in their present, shaping their political decisions hundreds of years later.
It was the basic program of the Roman political mind. The story of 509 defined what it meant to be a Roman. It was a constant warning against bad rulers, and a constant call to sacrifice for the common good. It shaped Western political thought for 2,000 years. The founding fathers of the United States were very interested in this story. They saw themselves as new Brutuses, removing a new king.
It is amazing how a story, a myth, can have a longer and more important life than the empire that told it.
Because a good story is the most powerful tool humans have ever created. And the story of the birth of the Republic is one of the best ever told.
So, as we stand here, looking out over the forum where Lucretia's body was shown, where Brutus made his speech, we are standing in a place where history and story are completely mixed together.
They are completely connected. The real birth of the Republic is, as we said, probably a lost story of slow change, of political moves, and of money problems. It is the pile of broken pottery pieces that archaeologists find in the ground. It is complex, confusing, and not complete.
But it is what really happened.
It is what really happened. But what the Romans believed happened is the story of 509. The story of a terrible crime and a heroic fight. That is the perfect, beautiful vase they made from those broken pieces. They needed a simple, strong story to explain why they existed and to guide their future.
And in the end, maybe the story is more important than the reality. The belief in what the Republic meant is what gave Rome its power, not the messy details of how it really started.
I think that is a very smart way to see it. The truth of the Republic is not in a specific date, but in the ideas the Romans chose to connect to that date. They told themselves a story about freedom, good behavior, and sacrifice, and then spent the next 500 years trying to be like that story.
A story they told so well that we are still talking about it 2,500 years later. Giovanni, thank you. This has been, well, it has made everything I thought I knew more complex in the best possible way.
The pleasure, as always, was mine, Sarah. Rome is never simple. That is its beauty.
It certainly is. And for our listeners, that is all the time we have for today. Join us next time. We will talk about the difficult early years of the New Republic. Rome had to fight enemies to survive. If you want to walk these streets yourself, download Rome Audio Tour Guide offline. Search for Rome Audio Tour Guide offline on the App Store or Play Store, or visit www.romeunveiled.com. Thanks for listening to Rome Unveiled.